to tie process outcomes to business outcomes. And I'm very excited to have Max Smith with us here. Max has been focusing on understanding customer pains, their causes, and solutions for his entire career. Before joining the product team at Celonis, he spent 4 years as a product manager for a KYC software company, helping financial services institutions remain compliant with regulations. Today, as a product marketer for Celonis, he continues to investigate the challenges that face financial services in 2020 and bring that insight to the greater product team to help develop solutions to overcome those very unique challenges. Max, really grateful to have you with us today and sharing your expertise on this very important topic.
Jose, thank you so much for having me here. Happy to be here. I'm really excited to be a part of the show, and I'm happy to share what I've learned over time, and hopefully everybody can get something good out of this to take back with them. So without further ado, I think I am going to kick off the presentation. And just checking, everybody can see the screen, right?
Looks good.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. So today we're going to talk a little bit about process excellence in banking, and specifically how process excellence leads to better business outcomes, and some of the best practices and methodologies that we can use to ensure that things that we're doing to improve our processes, specifically in banking, are ultimately leading to those business outcomes. So like Jose said, I'm Max Smith. I'm a global product marketing manager here at Celonis. In my past life, I was a product manager, and my favorite part of my day is interacting with prospects and customers and partners and industry experts, and really understanding what's going on, what challenges and pains people are facing in their day-to-day, and then understanding how best we might be able to address those pains. So I'm very happy to be here and share some of that insight that I've gathered, and also the insight that Celonis has gathered over time. Jumping right into the agenda. So first, we're going to start off with a little bit of background, current state of affairs in banking, specifically from the digital transformation side, that kind of background. Then we're going to get into some of the challenges that we see, and that's particularly around the process friction, what things are slowing down processes within businesses that are leading to these challenges that are causing us not to achieve the outcomes that we want to see. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the methodology that Celonis uses to understand these problems and react to them, and really improve the business in a meaningful way. And again, that's really a discussion about the methodology itself, not really a discussion about technology at that point. And then last, we're going to talk about a customer success story with a bank that implemented this methodology, and talk about some of the results that they were able to achieve, and get a little bit of insight into how they were able to do that. Finally, ending up with a little bit of Q&A. So go ahead and kicking it off here. So one of the trends that we've seen, particularly in the last decade, is that companies are spending billions on digitizing processes within enterprise software. I mean, they're spending an incredible amount in bringing in new technology to help this digitalization movement. And we see this quote from Gartner here, where digitalization is rapidly changing how organizations create value and how they compete. And the idea of bringing in technology is not necessarily new. If we look at this timeline on the bottom, we can see that over time we've adapted technology solutions. Things aren't done on pen and paper anymore. And even though sometimes systems can be outdated, and definitely there are legacy systems that still exist and operate in a lot of financial institutions, there is this trend where we have been investing in technology. But I think now more than ever, we've really gotten to a point where we're kind of at this critical mass, this critical threshold of what that really means, and really embodying the idea of using data to run businesses. And I think one of the reasons for this is that there's all these new challenger financial institutions, and we hear words like disruption being thrown around, and things like digital native. And I want to take a second to just pick that apart and understand like why that's important. So I think again, this move to cloud, which has really only been embraced in maybe the last 10 years, and particularly in financial services, because it's so regulated, like privacy is of the utmost importance, unlike some other industries. But it is starting to be embraced, particularly over the last decade. But the reason that these challenger banks are popping up is it's about the customer experience at the end of the day. I think that people are realizing that you win or lose on the customer experience, and these companies aren't going digital native just for technology's sake, right? Or just for transformation's sake. It's really about those business outcomes at the end of the day. And I think the critical one in this case is really the customer experience. You know, a little personal anecdote here. So I'm refinancing on my house. You know, a lot of people are doing that right now because of the record lows because of COVID. And I went with a new fintech company. They've only been in the business for 4 years. Everything was automated. It was super easy to go online, upload the documentation I needed. I had people reaching out to me at exactly the right time, telling me what they needed. So the entire process was seamless. And when I went for my original mortgage, it was actually like an older local bank, and it was a lot of pen and paper. Their hours were weird. It wasn't 24/7. I had to either have a bank account with them to pay for my mortgage or hand off a check in person. So like, you know, again, it's not technology for technology's sake. It's really about that customer experience that people are focusing on. And that's why all of this money is being spent on digitizing these organizations. And just, you know, there's some statistics here, again, coming from Gartner, that the average company has 508 enterprise applications, which is a crazy amount, maybe too much, depending if you have some redundancy there. There's $431 billion total spend on enterprise software, and 2 out of 3 CEOs are saying that digital strategy is a top priority. So the good news is for the transformation office, we have the attention. There is definitely money and effort being directed at this cause. And I think now more than ever, you know, I hate to say this because of what's happening with COVID, but efficiency is so key now. You really need to make these processes fluid and make sure that there isn't a lot of waste. And so I think it's forcing the issue even more than we're seeing here. But the challenge that we're seeing is that those processes still aren't delivering the expected results. And I mean, this also is not something particularly new. This has been the case, I think, since we've had technology entering the scene. The Gartner says the digital transformation projects are over budget and behind schedule. And I think if you look at some of the KPIs in the world's best run companies, you can see this. And these are all, again, related to that customer experience being a driving factor, but it takes 20 days on average for customer onboarding. The Net Promoter Score is 25, which for those of you that aren't familiar, it's loosely a measure of customer satisfaction on a scale of -100 to 100. So that's, you know, there's still a lot of potential there. And only 68% of customers actually come back for more for an additional product or a service. So these are, and this is in the world's best run companies. So these numbers could obviously be improved, and if it's not one of the world's best run companies, you know, they could potentially even be a little bit lower. So there's this gap right here, right? We're spending all this money on enterprise software and digitization, but we're not seeing the results that we expect in our outcomes, and in this case, particularly customer experience. And so what's impacting those metrics, right? So we talked a little bit about the technology, we talked a little bit about the outcomes, but what are the processes that underpin those outcomes? And they're all across the banking value chain. We see 4 service centers basically here, 4 centers of operation: governance, risk, compliance, customer, operations, and finance and administration. And you can see that within each of those different sections, there's so many different processes that go into making the financial services institution operate smoothly, and so many different KPIs that we're measuring and tracking, or we should be measuring and tracking, to understand how we're performing. So it's not and this adds some complexity, right? Because it's not a one-stop shop. It's not just one application that we need to be worrying about. If you want to deliver truly a better customer experience, you can see that there's a ton of different processes involved. Anything from bringing them on as a lead, for when they're handling an application, to when you're onboarding them, to managing their portfolio, so to customer service. There's all these different touch points, right, that we need to master. So this is the when we're talking about processes, this is really what we're thinking of to ground the conversation. And if we look at some of those processes, and in this case, we're looking at just credit application and KYC as an example, we can see that where some of that friction comes from. And some of it comes from all these disjoint applications and technologies that we have within the company, you know, various different systems that are being used. In addition to like IT systems, you know, legacy systems or like a ServiceNow, or even like Workday, you know, Blue Prism, you have some automation solutions. In addition to that, there's also all of the desktop tools that are being used. So things like Excel and email, and people are taking notes. So those are all part of these processes as well. It's not entirely digital. But between those two things, between the actions that people are taking, on their desktop, and the actions that are happening in these core banking systems and these onboarding systems and these other source systems or legacy systems, we do have an IT footprint. We have a trail of exactly what's happening. And so we can see exactly, we realize, so we see, start and outcomes here. Like for instance, in credit application, the application's created, and the ultimate detriment is that there's some leakage there. It gets lost, maybe it gets lost with a credit check or something like that. And by the time you figure it out, the customer's already gone somewhere else. Or with the KYC process, it's initiated and you eventually get it done, but it takes too much time, right? And it violates your SLAs. The beauty of having all this information is we can tell what went wrong. I mean, the challenge here is that it is fragmented and it is complex, but the beauty is that there's this IT footprint. We can see exactly what's happening in these systems. We can see how long it's doing to take specific activities. We can see the root causes that are causing these ultimate outcomes to happen. And so that's one of the benefits of having all of this information. And sometimes these processes are intermingled, right? In this case, for credit application, KYC is also a part of that credit application process. So sometimes they're disjointed and they can be handled separately, and sometimes they're together and they can have a knock-on effect in other parts of the business. And I think the way that you know that you have friction within your business is if you are experiencing any of these symptoms. And the first one is if you don't know how your processes really run, if you don't have insight. So I think everybody is probably familiar at some point in their career, particularly if you're in the transformation office. You have this experience where you're sitting down, maybe you hire some consultants, maybe you try it internally first, but you get a bunch of people in the room and you say, okay, how does this actually work? What are people actually doing? And if you ask 2 people, you're going to get 5 different opinions, right? You might do some whiteboarding exercises, put some sticky notes up on a board, but the reality is that oftentimes people don't have the full story, or they have through no fault of their own, a biased understanding of how that process is really functioning. So what you need is to be able to see how those processes really run, and in order to do that, you need to be able to pull that information from those source systems and like that activity that the different employees are going through in order to paint an objective picture. So that's the first symptom. Another one is you don't know where the friction is and you don't know what the root causes are. So all you see is these outcomes. You know that you have a low NPS. You know that you have a long onboarding time. It's not at your target or it's not at your benchmark, but you don't know what the real friction is. Maybe you have some ideas, but you don't know for sure. And there might be things that even if you think you know that you're not aware of, that can still be uncovered. Hidden issues, if you will. And then the last one is if you don't have the means to fix the friction. So let's say you do understand how the processes run, you do understand what the specific challenges are, you can objectively prove both of those things, but then you still don't have a means to fix it. And I think that this is, automation is a big one here as a means to fix some of this friction, but there's also some process re-engineering, if you will, that in some cases needs to take place in order to make this happen. But in some cases, if you don't have the means to fix it, that's another symptom of this greater issue. So the way that Solonis views this from a methodology standpoint is there's really three key pieces to understanding and improving those processes in a way specifically that improves those business outcomes. And the first piece is knowing. And again, that's really just understanding how your processes really run objectively, all the information from your source systems, all the information that people are sending emails or using Excel or whatever they're doing on their desktops, getting all of that information in. And then doing a little bit of analysis to understand, okay, what are the actual pain points, right? And not only what are the pain points, but which pain points are the most important. It's important to prioritize. It's important to know which of these are going to really move the needle. And I think once you have that understanding, once you've done that analysis and really painted that objective picture for yourself, the next thing is you need to be able to sense that in real time. So if you know what's going on, but you can't intercept these problems, if you can't stop this friction as soon as it happens, then, it only goes so far. Like, you need to be able to actually do something once you have that insight. So sensing it is really important, right? To understand there's something that's happening in my process, right? Like, there's something with this particular credit application. Maybe it's missing some information. Maybe it's coming from an area that or working with a specific credit provider that we know we've had challenges with in the past, right? It's saying we have certain information about this point in the process. We know that friction is going to occur. We've identified what the root cause of that specific friction is, and then be able to come up basically with a solution for it. And so I think, that's a really key point is, again, once you know something, you need to be able to do something with that knowledge. And then the third piece is actually taking that action. And that usually comes in two forms. There's, of course, automation, but there's also bringing in people when it makes sense. You're always going to need people to make some sort of decisions. And I don't think that we're talking about, I don't think we're talking about automating away jobs. We're talking about automating away, like, remedial tasks and things that just very clearly should be automated, very clear manual action, so that the employees and the associates can actually use their time for some higher level activities that make more sense and get more value add for the business. And so those are kind of the three pieces of the methodology. I'm going to jump into this a little bit further. So the first piece, knowing how your systems or how your processes really run across all the source systems. I think that some key things that you want to look out for when you're trying to understand how to do this are, you need real-time data collection. These processes are happening in real time. It's not at the end of every day you have to get the what happened that day. When, for instance, again, when in my mortgage story, when I was just applying for my refinance, I uploaded some documents, and 30 minutes later, I was getting a response from the team saying, "Thanks for uploading these documents. There's nothing else you need to do right now." That kind of reaction and that kind of customer experience can only happen if this is happening in real time. So I think no matter how you go about understanding how these processes run, right? No matter what kind of technology you're using to do this, you do need to make sure, or I think it's very important, that we do it in real time. You also need to be able to visualize it, because that's the core of the analysis. You need to understand how those processes are running in real time to identify, again, what activities are problematic, what steps in the process are causing the most pain, and then you need to be able to drill down in specific cases and understand, why didn't this work? Because only once you have that analysis can you actually do something about it. And I think that an important piece of this is really understanding the variation. So I think a lot of people are surprised. Again, you have a standard. You look at something like credit application, and on the surface, it's really not that complicated of a process. Somebody fills out a form, they say how much they want to borrow. It comes in, and you need to do a couple checks to make sure that they're a person that you want to be doing business with. You need to make sure that they're credit worthy. And it needs to go through the proper approvals, but really that's not too complicated of a process. But when you peel back the onion and you look a little bit deeper, you might start realizing that you're asking them for additional documentation that maybe you don't need, or maybe they already provided a document that had information that you could have used, or something is getting stuck at a certain point where maybe it's going through 2 approvals and it only needed to go through 1. So these things that you wouldn't expect to be challenges, because it's not really something that makes sense, you'll start to see when you look at all these different process variations. The next piece is sensing. So this is, again, sensing. Once you have an understanding of what those pains and challenges are, you need to be able to identify them as they come in, and then do that root cause analysis in an automated way to understand, what are we going to do with this specific, in this case, application, right? And we need to make sure that we are understanding which applications are going to most impact our outcomes. So for something like a credit application, right, they're not all created equal. maybe if there's a particularly creditworthy individual that wants to borrow a large sum, this is something that shouldn't necessarily get held up at any of these maybe different process checkpoints that we see. And so we want to make sure that for those high priority applications, that we're treating them with the diligence that they deserve and the expediency that they deserve. And I think some of the things that you want to look for as part of this step is you want to be able to do that automated root cause analysis. So if you have to figure out for yourself what's causing this application to go through slowly each time, well, now it's just a tedious amount of work. You've almost duplicated the work for the applications. So you need to be able to understand in some sort of automated capacity, some sort of checklist, or something, some sort of system check or some sort of machine learning prediction model. That's something that's becoming more and more popular, particularly over the last, I'd say, 5 years. This has really gained a lot of traction to understand why this particular friction is occurring. And then I think the last thing is you need to be able to package that business logic across all the systems, and you need to be able to also access homegrown systems. So particularly in banking, I'd say more so than any other industry that I've had experience in dealing with, there are a lot of legacy systems, homegrown systems. There's not a lot of off-the-shelf products like you would see in a lot of other industries. So you need to be able to make sure that when you're doing this fencing, that you can do it with these systems that aren't exactly standard, for lack of a better word. And then the last piece is action. And I think action with intelligent automation, and I think intelligent is the key word there, is important. So again, you need to be taking action based on the outcomes and making sure that you're prioritizing appropriately. For those tedious manual work, things like just taking an application at a certain point and handing it to the next person. That's something that could easily be automated. Or reaching out and asking for some documents when they're missing. That's also something that could be automated, right? Making sure that the people that are involved in the process are asking real questions, interacting with the customers in a meaningful way, right? Because that's a big part of the customer experience. But automating away any of that tedious manual work. And also then part of this intelligent automation is making sure that there is a set of next best actions that are also prioritized for decisions and tasks that need to be made by an individual that can't be automated away. And I think that bringing this back to the title of the session, I think that this is a key piece because I think, and actually I'm going to go to the next slide to make this point. Going back to this overall methodology, the No Sense Act, I think that the way that you tie the process improvements to the business outcomes is by having both this analytical and operational piece. In this case, it's kind of know and act that's bridged by the sensing piece, because what you need to be able to do is to either make sure that once you have this insight about the process, that either you can automate away the problem in some way, or that you can bring the problem to the line of business people in a way that makes sense, that has all the context that it needs, that they need to make that decision and surface those options for those people. Because I think one of the challenges is that the transformation office, at least that I've seen, is in working with line of business leaders, it's always a matter of, yes, the line of business, and this is not everywhere, but something that I have seen is that the line of business leaders agree with the transformation office and say, yes, we absolutely need to improve this, but we just don't have the time to take a step back and change the way we're doing this. We're in go mode. There's no way that we can, so it's not that we don't want to change, it's that simply we just can't, we don't have the energy. And so I think one of the key ways to actually move the needle is to bring the actions directly to those line of business teams and say, this is what we think you should do. This is why we think you should take this action. And so there's really no, it's not like for them, it's not like changing their day to day. It's not saying you need to necessarily learn this new piece of technology or you need to do fundamentally different work in your day to day. It's just saying, hey, we understand that there's a list of things that you could be doing. Here are the things that are going to help the business, that are going to line up with your line of business targets in the most intelligent way. Here's all the information you need to make the decisions, and here's why we know that this is what's most important. And I think really just bringing that to the doorstep of the business is the key piece in moving forward, in making really impactful and successful change. And so I'd like to, I think, with the rest of my time here, talk about a customer story that they did just this. So CGD, we were working with them for their credit recovery process and also credit granting, but I'm going to focus on credit recovery specifically. And I think the quote from Joaquin here says it all. He's saying that those recovery agents that were using Celonis started recovering in 70% less time than others. And I think that first of all, let's just think about that. So you have credit that you're trying to recover for the bank. Obviously, the more credit that you can recover, the more quickly, the more cash that the bank has on hand then to reinvest. So the business outcome here is pretty clear for credit recovery. It's, get more money in-house. To say that you're able to get that money in-house 70% faster, put another way, that is, 70% less time. Put another way, that's 3.5 times as quickly, is a phenomenal business outcome, right? And the way that they were able to do this is they really embodied this no sense act approach, where at first they had the credit managers, or the credit recovery managers, had a good understanding, I guess, overall of how their like what the outstanding credit was, how burdened their agents were, but they didn't really understand the process and what was preventing that number from going up, like, again, really moving the needle. And for the agents, they had a list of work every day. They have a portfolio that they manage, but there wasn't any real prioritization as to how they were going about that day to day. And I mean, there definitely was. It wasn't like they were just shooting in the dark, but it wasn't, I guess, based in the data of the process. And so it started off as a process by knowing, with just a couple dashboards that they had built out, allowing them to understand kind of what the current outstanding activity was. And then it transitioned to getting some recommended next best actions for specific steps to take during the credit recovery process that would lead to faster credit recovery. And then it went to getting daily notifications in real time of activities that would impact their process. So, someone just opened an account, but they have outstanding credit. So that's something that you want to investigate. Or someone new has been added to your portfolio. So you need to start doing the deep dive dossier process for that individual. And so it was, and this was a good lesson in agility. And I know that there's a lot of people from the transformation office on the webinar listening in. So I think that one of the best practices that they went through, which was a real lesson in agility, they were able to basically get 200 people on board with this new way of, or this enhanced way of working, rather, in 3 months, which is pretty quick. I'd say for any sort of change management, 3 months is super quick, especially for 200 people. But what they did was they started out with a minimum viable product and kept the communication channels open. They started off with just a dashboard, something really easy that could give them some information that they didn't have. They wouldn't have to go into their CRM every day and run a report. It was just right there for them in the dashboard. And they said, what else can we do? And then the business was like, well, this dashboard's great, but I don't exactly know what I need to do next. This is a good overview, but it's not very prescriptive. So they went back to the drawing board and said, okay, here's some prescriptive actions that you can take. And here's the prioritization, and here's why. And a lot of it was based around, if you don't do this, you're going to violate the SLA, or this is a particularly important account that you need to be focusing on, or something like that. And they said, okay, well, this action's great, but it's not like up to the minute. And so they went back to the drawing board and said, okay, as soon as we get some new information, as soon as information comes in about someone opening up a new account, or you getting a new account added to your portfolio, you're going to immediately be notified about that. And so just gradually over time, they took these users, they rolled it out to a bunch of users, and interviewed the best performers and the people that weren't using it to get a good idea as to what people were enjoying, what people weren't with this new process, and kept that communication channel open. And I think just, again, understanding what you need to do and taking that next best action, bringing that to the doorstep of the credit recovery agents was really all the difference here. It wasn't just knowing that these were particular pains, that this part of the credit recovery process was slower. It was identifying and then taking action on that in a way that could really move the needle here. And again, 3.5 times faster money coming back in the door. That's a huge number. 12% improved SLA adherence. Again, a huge change. And that's only after 3 months. And that's only with 200 of their agents. So I think that this is just a really good story, a really good embodiment of this methodology, of these principles, for how to move the needle, for how to technically tie process changes, understanding what those process changes are, and then bringing that to the business to meaningfully impact business outcomes. So I think the last thing I'll say is just, I know we're about to jump into Q&A, but just everybody, thanks for listening. Don't go away. Again, we're about to go in QA, but thank you so much for listening. I know that, everybody takes a lot of time. Everybody's busy here. So I appreciate you having the chance to listen in, and I'd love to further the conversation. We're going to jump into Q&A right now. But if there's any other questions you have, I'd be happy to answer those offline as well. I love talking to the industry to understand more what's going on. So thanks again for your time.
Terrific, Max. So thank you for your presentation. And we had questions coming in during that, and I'm going to relay some of those to you now. First one comes from Fran Jurikny. I think Fran is, if I remember correctly, is in Michigan. And Fran asks, really more of a personal question to you. What is any specific training to learn how to improve operational processes? Tell us a little bit about your own personal experience and any training that you have received on improving operational processes.
Yeah, so I think I won't go so far as to, I guess, recommend a specific course or a specific program. There's lots of organizations out there that do this, and I'm not here to say that one is any better than the others, but I will break it down into two pieces. I would say that there is more of a technical process improvement training, right, where you understand from a system level what the inefficiencies are, how to improve them, how to measure them, what system changes you need to make. And I think, there's plenty of tools out there to assist in that, like process mining tools or BI tools or things like that, right, that help you understand from a technical level what's going on, and make data-driven decisions on how to improve the process. So that's one area. And then the other area is really the social project management, change management area, right? Which is, and this happens at a couple different levels, but it could be training on how do you align, if you're a leader, for instance, how do you align the incentive models in the company to match what you're actually trying to get out, right? Make sure that people are incentivized to be acting in a way that will actually change the process in a meaningful way that will then change the business outcomes. So I think it's, because change management is difficult, right? And I think that's kind of one of the points of the presentation that I'm trying to make is change management is definitely it's a super important piece, that you line up the process teams with the line of business teams. And I think part of that you can do through technology and through the methods that I described, but part of it is that social change. And so there's plenty of best practice organizations out there for how to implement change management. So those are the two.
Very good. Those are good insights. And Max, Antonio Urquiza asks about, excuse me, to what extent in what you presented, the root cause analysis process is really automated, and he asks you to elaborate a bit about the role of subject matter experts in the root cause analysis process in order to find the true root cause, and how much of that is automated, how much of it is just through dialogue and interactions.
Yep. And so I think that the answer is it depends. And I know that's not the answer you want, so I'll try to add some clarity here as to what it depends exactly means. But I think it depends on, one, what the technical maturity of the company is. do you have the kind of software in place that can assist in this analysis, right? Do you have machine learning models that can do accurate predictions and accurate analysis into what the root cause is? Do you have some sort of knowledge management solution that will let you understand which things impact which outcomes, right? And I think that, so that's one piece of it, right? And the more technically mature you are, and of course you need to have the business that actually understands the value of those and how they're used, right? Like meaningful technical maturity, then it legitimately can be more automated. And that's something that we've seen. That's something that we've helped customers, ourselves get out there and deploy. But then there are, of course, the role of the subject matter expert is going to go away. I guess I should have started with that, right? The subject matter expert needs to be there. They will have the insights. They are going to, even if you have one of these models, they're going to make the base set of assumptions for how to set this up and really do the analysis. So I think in some cases it is more of a in that know step, right? Where you're doing the analysis, you're doing the process visualization, you're trying to understand the root cause. That can be a very manual, and I say very manual, but I mean, again, it's visualized, it's easier. There's plenty of good technology out there that does this nowadays. It could be manual analysis that then they take back and take specific actions, but it also could be automated where we say, there's technology that says we see this process, we understand it, we've been here before, we know that for this specific outcome, these are the root causes to look for, and it's, go.
Very good. Victoria's Sabbath is asking about on the interactions that you have, maybe even from your perspective as a provider, but also from your clients' perspectives, the role of Lean and Six Sigma on some of these deployments. Do you interact with folks who are Lean Six Sigma practitioners and the companies that have that methodology in place, and how do you interact with companies like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great, actually, all three questions have been great, but this is also a great question. So absolutely, I think that speaking from a Celonis standpoint, for us specifically, we do deal with anybody on the transformation office side, so head of transformation, anybody in process excellence, anybody in Lean Six Sigma, any center of excellence, any process mastery, like any sort of department like that, for sure. And I think that those are the people really that are doing this analysis, right? This methodology is, we're focusing on those people, right? Because oftentimes we see the challenges with the Lean Six Sigma people, these black belts. Well, we know we've understood what's wrong with the process. Like, we figured it out. We know what the deviation is. Like, we can measure this very specifically. But now, what do we do with this? How do we convince the business? So that's part of what I was trying to articulate in the track is, yes, we deal with those people, but you need to be able to take that insight and go back to the business. And we also work with line of business, and I would say the best operations that I've seen personally, both at Celonis and elsewhere, is when those two teams really do work together. And that can come in a variety of different forms. That interaction we could talk about for, another hour, but so we won't go there, but yes.
Absolutely. Antonio Urquiza followed up on his question with a commentary on the answer that you provided, that his comment is that machine learning models typically give us correlation, but not causation. And the human element is still key to determine the real root cause. And I assume you're highly aware of this, and that's why it's so important to get the subject matter experts working with the technology and specifically machine learning to really understand if those correlations that come up are happenstance or if there are true causal effects that happen in the process, right?
Yes, and I think it's a great call out, and I absolutely, again, the role of the subject matter expert will never go away. I'm 100% confident of that, and I think it is true that your machine learning model is only good as the assumptions that are underpinning it, and so I think that you do need to start off with a set of known causes that you've identified are real root causes, perhaps during that know step that I'm talking about in the methodology, where you've said, we see in our process that we're requesting additional documents all the time, right? So this is clearly a point of friction. This is clearly something we want to look out for. And we know that if we're requesting additional documents, on average, it takes 3 days. And so if we have an SLA and it gets pushed out by 3 days, now this is like, I'm sure to Antonio, this is a gross oversimplification of the machine learning model, and I agree with you. This is more just business rules, but taken at the scale of the model, you're right. You do need to have some knowledge underpinning it, and when it comes out, you should still validate it and check it for accuracy on an ongoing basis. But by and large, you are going to get an improvement, even if it is only a correlation at that point. A known correlation, right? Like something that you've identified as a potential actual root cause for this for this particular challenge.
Very well. Tell us a little bit about the technologies behind the methodology. You have no sense act, the no sense act methodology, and curious about the technologies behind it. You talked about, of course, machine learning. There's an implicit RPA kind of bent to it as you talk about some solutions, and even the process mining, and there seems to be a basic technological architecture behind what you do. If you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is a good question, and because we're a technology provider, I tried to stay away from this as much as possible in the session itself. I think that, again, if you go back to the methodology and you look at it, it comes in a couple key areas. So no is effectively analytical applications, which anybody in the transformation office, I'm sure, knows what that means. And the ACT piece is really operational applications, things that like take action and assist in your day-to-day business. And then sensing could kind of be in the middle, maybe some like point solutions that like do a little bit of both. But if you look at the technology landscape, right? Well, so I'll start off by saying that process mining technology encompasses all of these, and that is the kind of solution that Celonis has. And that's kind of the last plug I'll give about that, because that isn't what this is about. But if you look at the analytical end, there's all kinds of tools, from process mining to BI to other kinds of analysis, to even things at the specific system level. Like a specific system might have some sort of analysis that you can leverage, right? There's all kind of things that you can understand what the challenges are with my system. And then for like sensing, you could have like some specific line of business apps that are saying, hey, this application's coming in, do this, this, and this in this order, and then send it to that person, right? And that could have a little bit of intelligence baked into it, right? So those like point solutions could be kind of sensing. And then acting could be anything from like, BPM, where you're building applications to string together different systems, and forcing the automations, to something like RPA, which is like desktop automation, to API automation in the back end, and actually directly going to the source system. So there's all kinds of automation technologies as well. And process mining kind of incorporates all three of those into one platform, and depending on what kind of other tool you have, they could incorporate more than one as well. So there is a plethora of technology that can be used here, and I think that they should be used in conjunction rather than together. I think that there's a place for all of them. Jose, I think you might be muted.
I was, thank you. I have time for one more question here. And this one is just your observations on the field. Are there any change management best practices that you see out there where we have a better win rate on these implementations?
Yeah, I mean, obviously communication's key. So first and foremost, if the teams involved with this change, from the people that are signing the contract to the people that are actually using any piece of technology that you're purchasing, if there's not alignment there, if one group is forcing it on another, then it's less likely to succeed. And I think that that's kind of obvious, but it's worth saying because I feel like that is where a lot of it falls down, is communication breakdowns internally. But the second piece is, and I think that this is something that you should focus on no matter what technology you use. It needs to be focused on the business outcomes. I think if you can't demonstrate clear value for the solution that you're implementing, whether that's like a manual process change or a piece of technology you're implementing, if you can't say that as a result of this, we expect our customer satisfaction scores to go up by 2 points, or whatever it is, right? And you don't have a way of measuring what impact that change is going to have. then it's unlikely to succeed because it's not going to have the buy-in. But if everybody's aligned, right, we say we're all going in this direction and we know what the outcome is and we know what the change is and we know how these things are related, then it's very easy because everybody's just saying, did we do that or not? There's no, there's no conversation. And those typically are the fastest and most successful implementations that we've seen.
Outstanding. Max, so thank you so much for being here, sharing your expertise with us and the journey, and we really appreciate that.
Jose, thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here. I'm happy to be able to share this with everybody. And again, if there were any questions we didn't get to, I'm happy to take those offline and continue the conversation. But thanks again so much for being here, and thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the segment, and we're gonna wrap up with a fantastic session by Patrick Law and Cliff Taroni who will share with us the building of the workforce of the future to achieve excellence. And it's a great way of wrapping up day one and discussing on what that workforce may look like, this workforce of the future to achieve this enduring greatness and excellence. So if you again have any feedback on the session, you can provide that as you close the session. There will be an option for you to provide feedback. If you have additional questions for the speakers, join us on LinkedIn and ask questions right there. Provide your comments about the sessions in general, and any follow-up questions you may have, you can post there as well. And the speakers are pretty good at checking on that and providing answers in that forum. So thank you. I'm going to close this one segment and we will open back up at the top of the hour. Thank you very much.